There's a street in Tel Aviv you cannot find on Google Maps, not because it was demolished, not because it never existed. It's a real, functioning street sitting in the heart of one of the most photographed, monitored, and documented cities on the planet. Both Google Maps and Russia's Yandex Maps independently made the same decision: blur the satellite imagery, strip the street view data, and erase all location information for that entire city block. The street is called Leonardo da Vinci Street, and tucked right behind a pair of 18-story luxury residential towers known as the Da Vinci Complex, hidden in plain sight, sits the most classified piece of real estate in the state of Israel. According to documentary research and construction records pulled from declassified American government files, beneath those towers lies Facility 81. It's a subterranean intelligence hub spanning roughly 6,000 square meters, electromagnetically hardened, built with American funding, and engineered by contractors from the United States. The structure was designed to maintain full communications capability even if every surface installation above it stops functioning. It was built to survive electronic warfare environments and the total collapse of above-ground infrastructure, allowing the people inside to continue directing military operations after the world above them goes dark. Directly adjacent to that site, buried beneath Israel's Ministry of Defense compound known as the Kiryat, Israel's equivalent of the Pentagon, sits a second installation called the Citadel of Zion. The New York Times was granted limited access and described it as a nerve center where roughly 70 personnel sit at consoles in front of wall-mounted screens, tracking strikes in real time. The Alma Research Center reported that during active conflicts, thousands of soldiers operate there around the clock. The Citadel of Zion is a newer, deeper expansion of an older command node that Israeli military personnel referred to simply as the Pit. Together, they form a hidden command architecture that Israel spent decades constructing, expanding, and concealing from the public. On March 11th, the 12th day of this war, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced a strike against that complex. The stated target wasn't the surface buildings or the perimeter. It was specifically the underground command infrastructure beneath the Kiryat in the center of Tel Aviv. That same zone had already been targeted during the 12-day war in June 2025. An Iranian ballistic missile struck the Da Vinci complex during that earlier confrontation. The Jerusalem Post later reported that the impact landed extremely close to where Benjamin Netanyahu's office was located at the time. Israeli authorities sealed off the area immediately after, blocked cameras, and issued zero official statements. Weeks later, renovation work quietly began inside the Prime Minister's office. To this day, satellite imagery of that neighborhood in Tel Aviv remains censored. France 24 conducted an analysis and concluded that Israeli media coverage of the Da Vinci complex strike was likely deliberately held back. One major Israeli outlet waited a full 2 weeks before publishing any details about the aftermath, even as photographs had already circulated online. Now Iran is claiming it hit the same zone again, and Israel responded exactly the way it did last time: streets closed, cameras blocked, no comment. Before drawing conclusions about that claim, you need to understand the architecture being targeted, what hitting it actually means, and the specific weapon Iran used to attempt it. The IRGC has publicly named its targets throughout this war. That list includes 27 American military bases, Ben Gurion International Airport, 7 American and Israeli radar systems they claim were destroyed, and the Kiryat, which was identified as a priority target from day one. In the IRGC's first-day operational statement, the primary target list included Tel Nof Air Base, the Kiryat compound itself, and a major defense industrial facility in Tel Aviv. Iran had already hit this complex before, and the documentation of what happened was classified. Now it's hitting it again, during a war where Iran has already demonstrated the ability to penetrate Israel's layered air defense network and drop missiles into central Tel Aviv, proving that interception calculations aren't reliable. The question being asked right now in every defense ministry on the planet, answered only by blocked roads and blurred maps, is whether this time was different, whether something underground was actually reached, whether the nerve center Israel spent decades burying remains intact. That answer reshapes the trajectory of a war that, by day 12, had already invalidated nearly every assumption the United States and Israel had going in. To understand the significance of the claimed strike on the Kirya's underground infrastructure, you need to understand the Iranian Khorramshahr 4 missile, also called Khaybar Sheikhan, in its cluster munition variant. It entered Iran's arsenal in May 2023. Its range sits at roughly 2,000 kilometers, putting every major Israeli city within reach from deep inside Iranian territory. The standard warhead configuration carries approximately 1,000 kilograms of explosive payload, roughly equivalent to the destructive load of the largest conventional bombs dropped from aircraft during World War II. But it's the cluster configuration that transforms this weapon from a precision instrument into something far more dangerous against hardened underground infrastructure. The warhead opens at approximately 7 kilometers altitude, releasing around 20 independent submunitions, each carrying roughly 2.5 kilograms of explosive. They saturate a radius of 500 meters or more over dense urban terrain. The IRGC confirmed the use of this weapon during the 19th wave of Operation True Promise. Targets listed included central Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport, and the Israeli Air Force's 27th base. Iranian state media and military statements confirmed cluster submunitions landing across multiple Tel Aviv districts. Israeli fire services responded to 2 impact zones in central areas where fragmentation elements had dispersed. Rescue workers described in Israeli media finding a civilian with severe fragmentation injuries, the characteristic wound pattern of small submunitions scattering on detonation. Here's why this is critical to the underground bunker question. A standard warhead hitting the surface above a buried command center needs to punch directly through the earth. Against a facility shielded by reinforced concrete at depth, a surface detonation at the wrong angle does very little to whatever sits below. But a cluster warhead operates on entirely different logic. It doesn't attempt to drill through the earth with a single impact. It saturates the surface above the target with dozens of independent explosions across a massive footprint. That destroys ventilation shafts feeding air to the underground complex. It eliminates communication antennas and relay systems installed at or near ground level. Cluster strikes collapse access points and turn the surface directly above the installation into a denial zone, somewhere no one can safely emerge from. That's a different category of attack on underground infrastructure, not direct penetration. Systematic surface denial. Whether that's exactly what happened at the Kirya on day 12, Israeli authorities have chosen not to say. They're operating identically to how they behaved in June 2025: seal the area, prohibit filming, maintain total silence. That silence exists alongside a mirror situation that Israel itself confirmed and publicly celebrated. On March 6th, roughly 50 Israeli Air Force fighter jets dropped approximately 100 munitions on Khamenei's personal underground bunker beneath the government complex in central Tehran. The IDF released footage of the strike and announced the complete destruction of the facility. According to military reporting, the bunker ran beneath several city blocks and included meeting chambers and command posts for Iran's senior leadership. The Alma Research Center reported that Unit 8200 and Unit 9900 spent years mapping every corridor before the strike was authorized. Israel provided proof. Iran has provided no verification of its Kirya claim, but the absence of published evidence doesn't mean an event didn't occur, especially under the strict information control both sides are running. That's particularly true when the previous strike on the same location came with identical street closures and news delays. Google Maps and Yandex Maps still refuse to show the block where the June 2025 missile reportedly landed. The confirmed aggregate numbers from this war don't validate the specific claim, but they establish the context within which it needs to be evaluated. Iran has launched over 500 ballistic and cruise missiles and conducted more than 2,000 drone operations since February 28. The IRGC publicly confirmed that figure to Fars news agency on March 5th. Of that total, approximately 40% of strikes were directed at Israel. The remaining 60% hit American military positions across the Gulf region. On day 1 alone, roughly 90 ballistic missiles were launched at Israel. Day 2 saw around 60. After that, intensity dropped to approximately 20 per day. But the character of the attacks shifted. Individual salvos became smaller and more precise, and the munitions became heavier and more destructive. What began as a campaign designed to overwhelm air defense systems transformed into targeted strikes against specific surviving infrastructure. That shift toward precision is exactly what makes the command center claim worth taking seriously. If Iran burned through its largest and least accurate inventory in the opening days, what's flying now is the better stock. Israeli casualty figures have been confirmed across verified reports. As of early March, 1,900 Israelis had been hospitalized. At least 10 Israeli civilians had been killed, with 4 more in critical condition. The March 1st strike on a shelter in Beit Shemesh, where a missile carrying 500 kilograms of explosive collapsed in underground refuge, gave military analysts pause. That event demonstrated that Iranian missiles could penetrate civilian infrastructure at depths it was never engineered to withstand. If a standard shelter beneath 2 stairwell flights couldn't hold, the survivability calculus for military command centers becomes considerably more complicated. Meanwhile, the IRGC is not the only party tracking the underground dimension of this conflict. American forces struck subterranean missile installations in Isfahan using B-2 stealth bombers, dropping 2,000-pound bunker-busting munitions on deeply buried Iranian positions, confirmed by the White House on March 10th. The United States is attempting to eliminate Iran's missile infrastructure at the source, including everything underground. Israeli signals and imagery intelligence units spent years mapping Khamenei's personal compound before releasing munitions against it. Both sides know exactly where the other's critical nodes are buried. Both are striking them continuously. In this war, information is as powerful a weapon as the missiles themselves. Iran needs its claims to appear credible to Israeli society and to the broader international audience. It needs to demonstrate that no underground layer is safe, that no command architecture is beyond reach. For Israel, the opposite is essential: the perception that its command and control capability remains unbroken. The moment serious doubt emerges that the command layer has been compromised, the war shifts in character. Allies begin recalculating. Adversaries begin acting with more aggression. The entire psychological foundation of deterrence rests on the belief that the defender can absorb the first strike and still respond. That's why the streets of Tel Aviv are sealed. That's why the satellite maps are blurred. This is where the underground war story intersects with every other dimension of this conflict. Nobody has clean, fully verified information right now. Oil markets are being manipulated by contradictory official statements. Air defense degradation claims are being contested. Ceasefire reports are being denied. Sea mining disclosures are only partially confirmed. The most important military installation in Israel has been named as a target, and the territory around it is closed. Both governments are running the same operation, controlling what the rest of the world is allowed to see. Mojtaba Khamenei, who became supreme leader fewer than 4 days ago, is now making targeting decisions. A man who never held a state position, who inherited this war from his father, is now deciding where Iran's missiles land and what they carry. The underground command centers of both nations are the most consequential real estate on the planet right now. Neither government will tell you the truth about their condition, but the sealed streets speak for themselves.